Welcome to Tibco's Fireside Chat series. With me today is Abhi Dugar, and he is Director of Cloud Infrastructure and IoT Security at IDC. Welcome for joining us. Thank you. Then glad you could be here and take time in your busy schedule to participate. We appreciate it. And then Nelson Petracek, who is Chief Technology Officer at Tibco Software.
Good to be here again. I enjoy these conversations with you
yeah,
all the
these
time.
are always
Yes.
a good time, right?
Good.
And so, as I told you guys before, pretty informal. We're going to have a little fun today in the way from what we typically do. We're going to switch the order around. In our typical order is we talk about trends, then we talk about business value, and then we come back and talk about future. So I thought it'd be fun. Let's talk about future first. And then you can talk about trends you think will support the future.
So we're going to go backwards this time around. Excellent.
But we will get to the most important topic last, which is what is the business value? Why do companies care, right? And that's really what this is about in the end, right?
Sure.
Otherwise, we wouldn't need to, but you talk about it, right? It wouldn't matter. All right, so that future, your thoughts, your guys' thoughts on, we're talking about blockchain, we're talking about IoT, topics of security. One of the big topics, especially in IoT, is how do you secure a microcontroller? How do you know that's the microcontroller? And when you're in a warehouse and it's your own warehouse, right? Pretty easy, right? But even issues there. But we talk about now with devices being so distributed, it could be so remote. How do you know that's really yours? That's one thing. The protocols to do that. How do you do that? Like, can't do the same way we would secure a cell phone with, SSL or TLS or something like that, right? So all kinds of issues around there in the future. Devices, they get more intelligent. They start to communicate and talk to one another. The areas around that and how do we manage that, And I know one of the things Nelson and I chat about a lot, and he brings up is, especially device and blockchain, is the concept of devices paying themselves and micropayments.
Of course, yes.
So autonomous vehicles, right? There's just so many areas of which you see IoT and where we think blockchain can start to, right? So we'll start there.
Yeah. You threw out everything that was out there, right?
So you want to keep this under an hour, right?
By the way, those are my examples. You can choose your own. You can ignore me completely.
No. These are many great topics, from the security aspect of the endpoints to devices talking to each other and how blockchain plays into it. I think there are many things that are coming together. Clearly, we are moving from an environment where we have been dealing with the IT security aspect of it. And as we move towards IoT security, that's a little bit different type of challenge because some of these endpoints that you talked about, like the microcontrollers, they don't have the capability to where you can install applications on top of them, say antivirus or something. They're just built in. When you buy that device, that's what it is. And whoever is designing it, whoever is putting together the system is responsible for, say, so to speak, baking in the security at that point. And it can't be something that you can think about afterwards and come back and say, I'm going to do something with it. That's one aspect of it from a security perspective. The other aspect of it is that these embedded systems, you don't know where they have been made, what was the supply chain. If you buy something very simple, maybe a shoe or something, I mean, that shoe will eventually become IoT enabled or something like that. You don't know what all touched that shoe, and if it was tampered with, and that chip that you were talking about, that microcontroller itself, that could have been tampered with. So I think some of those things are starting to get addressed because a lot of that was being addressed from a software perspective. Because you could create software enclaves and separate the different applications onto different pieces so that you could make sure that they didn't talk to each other or hurt each other. But people are going even further down to attack in those IoT type devices. So those need to be secured at a physical level, at the silicon level. So that's what I see the future. To answer your question, where we are going is that that identity and access management for that IoT device, the root of trust has to be based in hardware. And that way you can guarantee in a blockchain system, for example, that what talked to something else was the actual what you expected
device,
would be talking, and not just something that it's not a fake identity at that point, because the trust is built into the hardware.
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense because, like you said, people have been trying to address this through software, but when you get down to the device level, and given the type of information that's going to be produced by these devices, and then the decisions are going to be based on that information, and even things like the immutable aspect of the blockchain and the ledger itself, you need, people forget that the blockchain is only as accurate as the information you put into it. So if it's coming from an IoT device that's not the IoT device,
and with a fake IoT
with
device,
a fake IoT device, you're going to have a problem,
bad information.
Absolutely.
And the other aspect that you touched upon is that people talking to machines was the norm so far. But going into the future is more and more machines talking to machines. And so far, okay, I have my smart watch talking to my phone. Okay, that's one. But that's a very basic case. We are talking about a much more complex ecosystem of lots of devices talking to lots of other devices. And to that, on that, if you build a hierarchy of devices talking to devices who then control other devices, that is sort of the future, again, to answer your question. And we are not there yet. Because that opens up a totally different realm of security issues where blockchain can play a huge role. And right now we have usernames and passwords because humans are interacting with devices, and you can associate that device with somebody, like your cell phone can be associated with somebody. Who's going to associate these devices with whom, right? There's some sensor sitting in a farm talking to something else.
Yeah, that's true. And you see this because people always think of, like I said, the watch talking to the phone and those kinds of things, which if that doesn't work, what are the implications? It's a little different than a car talking to a bridge or to other pieces of infrastructure, or even things like safety issues, distributed energy resources coming online, going offline.
Climate impact.
Absolutely.
Or something. Critical infrastructure.
It's huge in this case.
Is huge.
Absolutely. So security is a critical aspect to all of this. I mean, you had mentioned micropayments. And that's more just an exchange of value, so that you can have one device provide services to another device, and how do you value that? How do you create that exchange? And if without the security aspects in place, I mean, you can imagine what that would be. Absolutely.
How much do I owe to whom?
Yep. Absolutely.
So let's switch gears now. Let's move up. So future, right? Some pretty interesting challenges, but when we look at the trends that are happening today, this kind of makes it a little, not as hard as I said, by the way, going from current trends. You can see what's going on today, and that it leads to that, right? It really does, right? And it's not hard reading the predictions by others of how many devices will be around by the year 2020 and so forth. And again, we see what's happening today and know that's realistic. So let's talk about trends, though, that are going on today, and things that, and probably things we're already starting to do as an industry, right, to get ready for this future. And I'll call out one I saw interesting, the company Filament and what they're doing with blockchain to do security for IoT. Just an example of ways to start to approach that. So, what are your guys' thoughts on the current trends?
So I'm not directly familiar with Filament, but I think what I see is what people are trying to do with blockchain and security together is to make sure that the information that was written into the chain can be trusted. Because if you can have the first part solved, which we talked about earlier, that the identity can be trusted, then the information that goes in there can be associated with that device. And once that trust is there, then it opens up the possibility to implement a number of other applications on top of it. I mean, even things like smart contracts that could sit on top of it that get automatically executed so that certain amount of money gets transferred or services get transferred, or people can go back to it and check that this was actually done. So compliance and governance aspects of it, those are, I think, very key capabilities that that something like blockchain can support, because there is a trustable chain that you can go back to and check and audit, so that audit trail being in place.
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense because you've got kind of two different things that are going on. You've got the trends around current use cases and the investigation around what makes sense, what doesn't, where does IoT play, and then as you go further and further out to the edge, then you run into these issues around security and identity and potentially micropayments eventually and so on. You've also got this kind of research that's being done because the popular current set of blockchain technology, let's say, doesn't necessarily map back to and support what we're going to need in the future. Or even today, I mean, all the requirements that would be required around IoT at that scale today. So one of the things you often see is even things like consensus algorithms. So everyone hears about proof of work, right? Bitcoin, proof of work, how does this work? Make sure that
there's lots of consensus.
So there's lots of new emerging algorithms.
Yeah.
And some of them are being driven by this need to have essentially transaction costs that are pretty much zero when you get down to micropayments.
That's a problem. We're using the blockchain type concept. Proof of work, right? It's not, doesn't work very well for micropayments.
No, not at least given its current form. I know there's a couple of companies that are looking at alternate forms of proof of work to help support IoT transactions. But
there's also the proof of stake that is coming into the picture. So
yeah,
I think that
definitely a lot of them, and actually other data structures as well.
Right.
Directed acyclic graphs and some of these other
Yeah,
things.
DAG is DAG is definitely a very promising concept for IoT type situations, especially.
Right.
So I think, just where we were just discussing really leads us into the last area, which is value, business value. Why companies care. Why does this matter? We know where we're going with the future with IoT and where it's going to drive. But, blockchain and its ability to provide value to companies and values in different ways, right?
Yeah. There is a huge, one of the most basic values that I see is the transparency that it provides, because today to get the transparency or trust, you have to go to a third party, and which is expensive. I mean, the ROI is right there. Of course, there's a cost of running the blockchain, which needs to be considered also, and how big that network is, and how many devices need to be supported.
Governance and all that as well around it, absolutely.
So all that part is there, but if those can be addressed, the fact that you don't have to have an intermediary to trust who takes a cut of all the transactions that are taking place is immediate ROI that can be.
Right.
So that's one thing that
I agree. I mean, and you touched upon this earlier, the idea of smart contracts. I know a lot of the conversations that we have are really around the automated execution of almost processes across a blockchain network. So this IoT device, which hopefully is the right one, gives you a piece of information that makes its way to the network. It gets executed via, through a set of smart contract logic, and then that also triggers other behavior, other interactions across all the participants in that network with, the recording of what was done and hopefully in a mutable way. And so I think there's a lot of value to organizations around being able to automate these transfers of information or transfers of value or assets or whatever it is, this exchange, automate that and really increase the overall efficiency of a broad, wide-scale network of participants.
Right, and if you build in the cryptocurrency aspect, when you talk about the micropayments, and I'm not talking specifically Bitcoin, it could be any other type of cryptocurrency as well. As long as you have some type of a cryptocurrency aspect built into it, that removes a lot of friction in the transactions. Because right now that friction is that I'm trading in or buying and selling things in dollars. Somebody is doing it in euros. Somebody's in Japan doing it in yen, or in China, right? So, so we are sort of in our own little buckets, doing our own things, right? Because and every time we have to go over to the other currency. It is expensive, and again, those intermediaries come into the picture. You have to pay them, and
there's
the
a
government gets
time
involved.
delay.
There's a time delay involved with it. All that can be eliminated if, obviously, it has to be architected and orchestrated properly to do that. But if you just step back and look at what the blockchain technology offers, it removes a lot of these barriers to quick transactions and doing it efficiently.
Right.
Right.
Well, it's, we're about at our time today, and a great conversation.
Already?
See, time flies, right? When you're having fun. Yeah.
Absolutely. We could sit for hours at this point.
Yeah, I always try, but don't worry, it's going to go by so quick you don't even know it. But so a lot of great insight from both of you. We really appreciate you both taking time to be with us here today. I know our viewers will certainly enjoy what you guys have shared with us. I certainly did. So I want to thank everybody for being with us today, and that ends our chat.
Thank you.